Welcome to the Living in Salida podcast, a podcast that offers insights into the charm and reality of living, working, and playing in the small town of Salida, Colorado. I'm your host, McCarthy, a realtor that specializes in buying and selling in the Salida, Colorado area. In addition to helping people buy and sell property here, I love connecting with the wonderful people of our community, learning about their experiences in our town, and sharing these little slices of life in Salida with you. The Salida community is an important part of why many people choose to live in Salida. And with me today is someone who is actively impacting our community in a positive way, Eric Lee. Eric is the Executive Director of Full Circle Restorative Justice, a local nonprofit that has been serving Salida, Buena Vista, and Canyon City since 2009. Their mission is to increase the health and safety of the community through restorative prevention and intervention. Eric has extensive experience in leadership and has had a career dedicated to criminal justice reform, which made him the perfect fit for Full Circle Restorative Justice's mission. And we'll talk a little bit more about Full Circle Restorative Justice here in a moment, but first I want to welcome you, Eric. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, first, I'll just start. We're going to just talk about you first, and then we can talk about Full Circle Restorative Justice and anything else. But tell me a little bit about how you came to Salida. What is your origin story?
That's tough. And one of the things that just jumped out was when you talked about my dedication to criminal justice reform. And that is true. But career-wise, I'm kind of a career mutt.
Oh, okay. So yeah, correct me then if I didn't.
No, it's not a correction, but it's because that is like the banner that I am actively wearing, and so that's what people see and most recognize.
Sure.
And it's really a lot broader than criminal justice reform.
Okay.
But back to the original, how I got here is kind of an interesting story. The first connection is my sister-in-law lives in Buena Vista. And my wife and I have been coming to visit Buena Vista for the last 20 years or so. I mean, we got married on the Arkansas River down in South Maine, in BV. There was a point where my wife's like, I want to retire here one day. And so rewind a little bit, and back in 2020, and my career actually began more in restaurants. I'm a retired chef, and I've owned 5 different restaurants in Boulder County, and that's where most of my leadership experience came in actually being an entrepreneur. And then I took and had a passion developed for human development, because I kind of saw from where I came from, and I'm originally from Detroit in the inner city, and lots of things going on there. Able to see how I was able to elevate myself, and I took an interest in doing that for others. So I became a coach as well. I've written a few books, and so I've done a lot of things, but everything kind of came to a head in 2020 around George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and Breonna Taylor. Mm-hmm. And that's when I really started getting active and reaching out, and I was able to work in a capacity with the Longmont Police Department when I lived on the Front Range, on their Citizens Review Panel, which was basically their version of internal affairs. But in Longmont, they're fantastic in their law enforcement, because they really wanted community connection and a sense of transparency with the community. And that's what that Citizens Review Panel was about, working with internal affairs. They call it the Professional Standard Unit, in handling all complaints that were levied against the police department. And so with that, my daughter, who is a big-time social activist, recruited me to do restorative justice with the Conflict Center in Denver, where she worked at the time, and I took that on. So I began to develop this thing around criminal justice and how we were doing things then, and I was doing it from a coaching lens, because by that time I had been coaching also for 5, 6, 7 years, and so the human development piece was really interesting to me, and being able to take that skill and help people in the restorative justice realm was really attractive to me. Yeah. And that's how I got into that. Okay. And then suddenly this job came up in Salida, and my daughter's like, you need to take that job. You got a sister-in-law up there. You got, so one thing led to another. Yeah. At first, when the job came up, it was like, no, I'm good. I got to practice with this booming, and I'm getting ready to retire, and I don't, But he just kept coming back. And then my sister-in-law up here called me. He's like, Eric, you're going to move to BV. I'm like, what? There's a job in Salida. And so finally I applied for the job, talked to Ken Matthews, who was the board chair at the time of Full Circle, and it was just a fit. Mm-hmm. And after talking to him, and then since, that was going on 3 years from now, taking on this role and what we've been able to accomplish, it's like every skill, every experience, everything I had done in my life led me to do this work the way I can do it now.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, it sounds like, so you just had multiple facets. So when you say coach, was it a life coach that you were doing? Okay.
Life coach, stress relief coach, executive coaching, yeah.
Okay. And then, so you were in the Front Range for how long before? Because I know you said you were.
Well, I moved from Detroit to Boulder originally in 1989.
Okay.
So
you've been in Colorado for a while.
I've been here for a long time.
Yeah. And it sounds like your daughter was a big positive impact on your.
She is still a big.
That's amazing. Dad, you gotta take this job.
It's funny too because our conversations once she grew up and my focus on coaching and overcoming what I had overcome, my focus was on human development and actually coaching people through and over obstacles that were in their lives and overcoming trauma, past pain, limiting self-beliefs and all those things. And I had a firm belief that coaching individuals, and that was and still is one of my passions, was the way. It was like, my daughter being social activist is just burn the system down. Mm. We got to burn it down and rebuild it. And I'm going, well, if you strengthen the individual, they can overcome these things, and it's not as important to burn it down, right? You work on this development here. Mm. And sure enough, all things are true. It's like, it's not either or. It's just that was my focus.
Okay.
But throughout these constant conversations, and we do have deep conversations all the time still, and collaborate on a lot of things around restorative justice, it came to, and this opportunity came for me to be able to take that self and human development piece and really work on transforming systems so that the systems work best for that. Mm. So it became a coming together of her burn the system down or transform it, and my belief of it, you really need to focus on the individual and their development to overcome these things, and working on and developing the skills needed and the belief needed to overcome whatever circumstances. But if we have a system that helps do that, then what kind of beautiful world can we create then? And that's what we're working on.
That's what you're working on. I love that. Well, that dovetails well into, tell us a little bit more about restorative justice.
Okay.
Well, Full Circle Restorative Justice. Let's talk about the organization here and our area, and then tell us a little bit about what that means.
Okay, great. So, when people hear restorative justice, and one of the things, and thank you so much for having me, because, part of our goal is to make sure the community understands what it is.
Sure.
A lot of people get a lot of things that come up when they hear restorative justice. And the most familiar realm that they think about with restorative justice is an alternative to the traditional justice system.
Okay.
And what it does and what we do is, and we primarily work with youth, and it's a system where youth are allowed to accept responsibility for any harm they caused, repair that harm. And if they are involved with law enforcement or the criminal justice system, then a lot of times the courts or law enforcement will dismiss that charge, having them fulfill that repairing of harm in the restorative justice way. And there's framework that's set up to do that. There's a pretty specific framework involved in doing that. And so that's the most familiar realm that people think about it in. We also do, and really most of our work and most of our resources go towards work in schools, where we help schools develop alternative systems to punitive systems of punishment and behavioral referrals for kids or the students. And we help them set up restorative models for that. And, so as we've been talking about a reaction to something that happens. Our work has shifted in the transforming of a system in one that is about building connection, changing climate in schools so that that kids do feel more connected and a sense of belonging, and thus they are much less likely to step out and have those behavioral referrals and develop those things that lead them towards the criminal justice system in the first place. So we're really trying to work way upstream to really, combat the problem at the root, and really help in human development, so that these youth who are more at risk for moving down that path are much less likely to move down that path, because they do have a greater sense of the great potential that every youth comes with before there's some kind of toxicity or trauma in their environment that affects that and sends them on another way.
In that path. So give us some examples of what you guys, in the school you were talking about impacting the kids before it gets to the point where they're doing this bad behavior. So give us some examples of what that looks like.
So, one of the things is like, okay, so and a lot of people know about restorative justice out there, and most people, when they heard about restorative justice, they think of circles.
Okay.
Because that's what happens in the final conference. Everybody circles up. It's back to indigenous practices of getting into a circle. Sometimes there's a centerpiece, sometimes there's a talking piece, and really connecting on a human level that's really built around trust and relationship. And that's how things are worked through. So instead of waiting for something to happen, we encourage educators to circle up just for connection. And just, when a kid is recognized and acknowledged and feels connected to that group where maybe they're pushed aside or ignored, they feel a greater sense of that. So those connection circles are a big piece of it. We do have a program that we did in Canyon City last year, because we have expanded to Canyon City as well, called Challenge Day, where we take a whole day and do activities like that. And I mean, it's really intense with volunteers, so adults are involved, so we are able to build the trusted adult impact as well. And by the end of the day, the kids really feel open and safe to open up and show themselves, show some of the experiences that they're coming from that weren't recognized by either their teachers or their counselors or the other kids in school. And when you do that, then those kids who may have been picking on them in the past or making fun of them, and part of the reason they're doing that is because they have their own stuff.
Sure.
And everybody's open for that expression of, oh yeah, we're all going through something.
Yeah.
And there's a connection and an empathy that's built around that really is powerful. I mean, to the point of there were kids that were coming out of that Own It Change It Day last year that were like, we're gonna come up with a club and we're gonna do stuff and we're not gonna bully each other anymore. I mean, these are kids taking control of this.
That's amazing. What age group was this?
That was middle school.
Middle school.
So
Ooh, that's a tough
eighth
year
graders
too.
Eighth graders.
Yeah.
And so they put posters all over the school, anti-bullying campaign. They had
That's
a club
amazing.
that went school-wide. I mean, so to be able to trigger that climate and environment in schools is really key for those kids who may otherwise fall through the cracks and be the ones who really become destructive in really sometimes horrendous ways down the line. If we can connect with those youth early, systematically, instead of just one-off or, okay, that kid needs, you know what I mean? That is the work that we're trying to do, and that's an example of how we can do it. But it's something that really has to be committed to, which here, by the way, here in Salida, Superintendent Blackburn has already committed to restorative practices a long time ago.
Great.
So we're already there, and we're just here to help support that. We also have a lot of support in BV around restorative practices. It is a little bit more reactionary in BV right now.
Okay.
We don't do as much of the connecting circles and things like that, but we are talking with them about doing the Own It Change It Day as well.
Okay.
So we've got great buy-in in this community around transforming systems and having systems of connection for youth.
That just sounds so important, because like you said, instead of waiting till they've done something bad and then having to restore that, and it's before. And what a big life-changing move, because that path is hard to get away from, I would imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a dream, personally, I've got a dream for a more restorative planet.
Sure.
And that's, I may not see the end of it, but every step I take while I'm here, I'm going to take it.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're making your impact where you can.
Yeah.
That's all we can do, right?
Yeah,
the world's a
absolutely.
big place, but you can
Yeah,
change where you are, right?
absolutely.
I love that. That's
I am
amazing.
committed to that, yeah.
But okay, well, I love those great examples for that. I guess, can you tell us a little bit more about, you talked about the criminal diversion program.
Yeah.
So you also said that that's something that you don't do. Is that just a part? It's just a part. Yeah.
So, yeah, and we cannot undersell, and maybe if I undersold that before, I need to go back and not undersell it.
All right, well, let's talk about it more then.
And when I said that is not as much as it's just if you look at, the percentage of resources we spend towards schools,
Okay.
just because it's, 5,000 students that we're impacting compared to responding to the referrals we get from the DA's office or law enforcement
Okay.
is, 60 kids a year. There's just kind of a discrepancy on how much time, how much resources,
Sure.
how many people are involved, and that type of thing. Now, with that in mind, we started off as a restorative justice diversion-centered organization, and that's what we did.
Gotcha.
And we're really strong in that area, and Cindy Merchant is our diversion manager right now. And so, my first year, which was 2022, between 2022 and 23, we did 26 cases in 22, and then in 23, we jumped up to 52.
Okay.
24, we did around 52 again, and we're on track this year to do about the same. So it's a lot of youth that we get to touch, just
Sure.
not, in the same way with the numbers we do in the schools.
Sure.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, and that's probably good, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
that program is
Yeah.
for youth that have already done something that justifies that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and the goal, and I've said this in staff meetings before, and Cindy likes it but doesn't like it, but it's like we're trying to put Cindy out of business, right?
Sure.
We're trying to make it so we don't need her for this work. Again, I don't know if we ever get there in my lifetime. I'm in my 60s now, so we're going to do the work, and we see impacts of the work, and we see how it's effective and all that stuff. But we're working on a system that's 200 years old or whatever,
Yeah.
and it's embedded, and the impacts of that system are still there, and it's going to take a lot of effort and commitment and constant presence
Yeah.
to transform that system, which is the work that we want to do.
Absolutely. Well, tell us a little bit more about how, some of the other stuff that you're doing with the community and how the community can, I guess, work with you to help with this impact.
So, again, work in schools is big. Work with diversion's big. We've also have a community service program that we operate. We just lost our manager for that, Jared, who did a great job in handling and both educating the community on what restorative justice is.
Sure.
Because many of your listeners and watchers might have never heard of this.
Sure.
And we
yeah.
want to fix that, right? Because next time it might be your kid who gets the call from us saying, okay, your kid had a referral in school because this happened, and we're going through restorative justice.
Okay.
And a lot of parents, when they get that call, it's like, what?
Yeah.
What the heck is that? Or that's the, hokey dokey stuff. We don't want to do that. And so the more we can educate on the community on what it is, how it works, and how impactful it's shown itself to be, because data is backing it up, the better we'll be. So
Yeah.
that also involves sometimes community disputes. I mean, a while back, FIBARC had a big dispute with one of our residents. We were the ones who came in and handled that dispute.
I remember hearing about that one.
And it worked out fabulously for everybody involved. We've done a few other community disputes. So restorative practices, restorative justice, which is comprised of restorative practices, is another way and an alternative just for handling disputes in the community.
Okay.
And so if there is a dispute, instead of immediately lawyering up and going for a civil suit, maybe there's a way for us to handle this restoratively.
So how is that different than mediation then? Because when you talk about from a legal perspective, mediation is often a first step with disputes.
Yeah, and mediation is just, and one of our volunteers, and I just met with him, JD, is a mediator.
Okay.
And JD, as a mediator, really is a proponent and advocate for restorative practices.
Okay.
They do work a little bit differently, you know,
Okay.
where the mediator more is in the center of a dispute to facilitate it, and kind of moderates two sides, and it's almost more of a negotiation.
Gotcha.
Where in restorative practices, it is more of a community process. And for instance, when we did the FIBARC dispute, there was the two sides of the dispute. You know, there's FIBARC, and then there was the community member who was involved or impacted. And then, you know, we facilitated. And then what restorative practices also brings in is community members and members of the community who are also affected by both actions.
Okay.
And that's what happens with the youth in diversion too. It's like the community comes in and gives voice to, okay, yeah, you harm, or there was harm committed this way, but there was also community harm here. And as community, we want to express so you get a deeper, more texturous understanding of what that was and how it impacts the whole. And so it really is more of a healing of the relationship that is the end than just a resolution of a dispute and a negotiated settlement, which mediation sometimes goes to that direction.
Okay.
I mean, the goal is towards a repairing of harm and healing of that relationship.
I see.
And it involves, it is more of a community process as well.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize it brought in community like that. Okay.
And that's, you know, that would be some of our volunteers, or a volunteer role for, you know, some of the processes with youth or processes for community dispute and it's appropriate to have those community members. Yeah, we want community voice involved with that. And so again, especially with youth, it's like, you know, if a youth, and we had cases where it may be a youth with destruction of property, right?
Okay.
Just as an example. And then, so you would have that youth who has agreed, I want to repair this harm, I want to take responsibility. And then, you know, I facilitate with a co-facilitator. And then we say, okay, we want a couple members of the community, and usually they're trained or at least oriented around the process through us. It could be a neighbor, it could be that kid's favorite teacher or whatever. But they come in and say, okay, yeah, you harmed that property, but that affects all of us because none of us like to look at that graffiti. It affects our property values when, you know, there's destruction or some kind of thing that happens that affects all of us because none of us want to have this. And so instead of this one-on-one adversarial type situation that happens in disputes or litigation, there's the voice of the community saying, yeah, and as humans, this is the impact. And that really has shown itself to be effective in people who are going through restorative justice. And again, we work more with youth, understanding and better able to take responsibility and that influencing how they go about repairing that harm. Because, you know, if it's those 6 people in the process, we don't move forward and it's tangible. We create a contract. I mean, you're in real estate, you know, contracts are everything, right?
Absolutely.
And so we come up with an actionable contract to repair that harm. This is not airy-fairy. It's like there's 4 to 6 action items to repair the harm that everybody in that circle has to agree on. And if one person doesn't, then we keep working until we find consensus on ways forward to repair that harm.
Gotcha. Does that process tend to take a while then, if you need that much weight?
It depends. You know, I've been in a process in school that was just short as 20, 25 minutes. Wow. And there's usually pre-conferences to set up and just get familiar with perspectives, explain the process, build trust and those type of things. And then the final circle or final conference, you know, short as 20 minutes, which isn't typical.
That's not the normal, okay.
You know, around an hour, hour and 15, hour and a half. I've been in one here locally, as a matter of fact, it was 6 hours.
Wow.
So
it kind of depends on the people and the complexity of it, I would imagine.
Yeah, and it's very individual. It's like, it's you know, that's the different from punitive systems is Punitive systems tend to be prescriptive. It's like,
Sure.
okay, you break this law, this is what happens to you.
Mm-hmm.
Where restorative justice is like, okay, I was harmed this way, and there's about 15 different ways that we can approach repairing that harm. Okay, so what are the strengths of that individual who caused the harm that will best and most appropriately repair this harm that makes
Okay.
this harm party feel satisfied?
Oh, okay.
You know, so it's more relational and collaborative that way, where it is not prescriptive. I mean, we can go into a circle not knowing, and we'll brainstorm around what are some possible ways that we can approach repairing harm here.
Okay.
But none of those things can come up when we get to the final circle, or none of them can be accepted by the group, and it goes someplace completely different that nobody has even thought of until we actually go through. Okay, why are we here? What drove you to do that? And this is how this impacted me. And this is what I have to deal with. And so all of these things kind of synthesize into, okay, yeah, the best way forward would probably be this, and this.
Okay. So what's an example, just, you don't have to use a specific example, but of what would be a repair? What would be something that would be agreed upon? Because it's not what we think of as like you get X number of days in jail or you get this fine, or you know what I mean, like
right.
what you're saying with the criminal
justice
system.
the most cut and dried, and I brought up destruction of property type thing. It could be maybe a youth does go and destroy some property or does some graffiti or something on a wall or does something like that.
Yeah.
Immediately it's okay. They're gonna paint over that property, or they're gonna, maybe, and a lot of our youth that are involved are affected by poverty or lack of resources, right? And so maybe they don't have the resources to pay, but then they come and cut that person's grass all summer, or agree to do whatever that is satisfactory to that harmed party to do that. I mean, it's like, we don't make this up. The parties collaborate to come up with a solution. And it has to be, one, amenable to both of them, and that responsible party has to be able and capable of doing that. So it's kind of strength-based in that way. And so that would be the approach, to find something like that.
Okay.
That comes up, and you find that in an instant like that, where that person, one, has to look in the face of the person they harmed and deal with how that affected them, which people underestimate the power of that. We're like in court, sometimes that harm party's not there, or they're looking ahead and they're over there and the lawyers are in between, and it's like, it's not a human interaction where you're dealing with, I really hurt this person and I'm feeling the impacts of that, and I really want to make that right. And that's part of why it's so effective, because there really is a transformation of how that person who was responsible responds to how they affected somebody else.
Yeah.
And they really learn from, they're willing to take accountability, and they learn from it, and in a sense are transformed and learn the lesson in life that my actions can impact people adversely, and I really don't want to be that type of person.
Absolutely. And I like that there's, other perspectives too, so they can, especially youth, it's really easy for young people to forget that there's a whole world out there. It becomes a little self-involved as we grow. And so to understand, okay, my action, I didn't just, to use the graffiti example, deface this wall. That was somebody's property, but it affects their property value and, their neighbor's property value, and how we feel about our place, and safety-wise of our whole community, and just broadening that lens sounds like it would be really valuable.
And it comes to the fore for them,
Yeah. And then how does that affect? I mean, you kind of alluded to stats, so I'm quizzing you here without preparing you. So if you don't know off the top of your head, it's okay. But in terms of reoffense, I know that's one of the
recidivism. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember that word, but so somebody who's basically it's supposed to help not recommit crimes.
Right.
So what is the data behind the effectiveness of
so
restorative justice
for 2 years in a row, ours was between 4 and 5% recidivism rate, where the national average is around 60.
Oh goodness. Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Because I mean, that's actually, I feel like that's almost common knowledge of just, you're in the criminal justice system. Once you're in it, because it's harder to get a job when you get out and, right?
Well, it's the labeling piece. And this is one of the reasons this is so important for us and for me personally in going and doing the preventative work in schools and to combat this thing. And the term is labeling, right?
Okay.
You take a kid or youth or anybody at 14, 15, 11, whatever age it is, they have an interaction with the law. And if the law in that interaction leads to an arrest, charge, incarceration, then that kid is labeled a criminal.
Yeah.
And what do they become?
Yeah.
I had a story. Jared, our community service manager, does a lot of work in the prisons, and he was talking to a kid, young man, in prison, and
Okay.
he said, the young man was like asking, why do you even care about it? What do you do? What drives you to be here helping me, right? It's like, why do I deserve this? And the young man said to Jared, it's like, when I was 10, my dad told me I was good for nothing and would end up in prison. I'm 32 and I'm in prison.
Yeah.
And so if we can, back to my original statement of create a system that helps to identify the greatness, the special unique talents and gifts and abilities and contribution that youth had come to the planet with, or has an inkling of, and develop that and label that instead, then what happens? And so that's part of the task of restorative justice and restorative practices in our work, is to make sure that as many youth as we can come in contact with, that we can see that and identify and label that beauty within them, the more we won't have to deal with this later on.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, it does sound like back to kind of your origin of that. It does align very well with what you were already uncovering and just bringing out that light in somebody. I mean, how important is it for somebody to remember they are good and capable and worthy, opposed to whatever negative label they were given by an outside party? And when you're that young, it's so easy to internalize that. Yeah,
and that brings something, and I missed this. And again, Cindy, our diversion manager, and she'll say this, when she starts to talk to people and really connect, and one of the things she does is like, okay, what drives you? What are you about? What's important to you? And sometimes these youth are like, what? Nobody's ever asked me that before.
Yeah.
I've never even had to think about this because nobody's gone there. And this is big too, and I kind of did not say it, but I talked about at length about repairing harms.
Yeah.
And that person being willing to take accountability for repairing that harms. We recognize and have learned that the main part of that harm is the self-harm. And that is how they harm themselves with this act, and the harm that happened to them to let them to think that this is the best choice for them in this moment, to harm somebody else.
Yeah.
Sometimes with youth, they're just kids doing stupid stuff, right?
Sure.
There's adult stupid stuff too. Not to say kids only do stupid stuff, but sometimes just kids they're new. They're trying to figure out life, and they just do something that kids will do, right? And it's no trauma involved with it. It's just kid stuff, right? And we have to discern that. But sometimes it is because they have been harmed.
Yeah.
And that is what's driving their behavior.
Yeah.
And so through the process, when I talked about 4 to 6 actionable items, in a lot of cases, 1, 2, or 3 of those items are things that they're doing to repair that harm that has happened to them. Whether it's a lack of resources and trying to get the resources, or it's counseling or coaching, or sometimes kids need tutoring, sometimes kids just need activities and they can't afford them. And so we offer resources for that type of thing too.
That's great.
So the self-harm piece is part of why that recidivism rate starts to nosedive, is because we're really getting to the root of the problem and not just punishing people, saying, go think about what you did, or you're going to spend some time here and you're not going to do this. No, well, if we don't actively get to the root of why that's there, which restorative practices tries to do, then we can't truly solve the problem. And so both individually and systematically, that is our work.
I love it. Well, how can people learn more about your organization and contribute?
FullCircleRJ.org is our website. Go
Great.
there. We have a calendar. We've got a fundraiser coming up on September 18th. We've got Own It, Change It days where we need adult volunteers to come and connect with these kids. And Own It, Change It Day, it's like I've done it like 6 or 7 times, and every time I say I'm not going to cry, and every time
it's okay to cry.
I mean, it was like you've seen a great movie, you cry to that movie,
Totally.
and then you see it again. It's like, I see this before I cry. Before I'm not going to cry again. And then sure enough, you get there, it's like, every time I do it, it's just like it's a combination of just the emotion in the room and what some kids are going through.
Yeah.
But the other part of it is like the way it is and what it does creates so much hope that there's so much beauty that brings you to tears too.
Yeah, I love that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I love what you're doing and what your organization is doing, and thank you so much for the positive impact you're having on our community.
Yeah.
I really appreciate it. Thanks
for
being here.
having me.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for listening. Again, I'm Monica McCarthy, a realtor who specializes in Salida and surrounding areas. If you're interested in connecting with me, whether it's to help you buy or sell a home here or about being on this podcast, all of my contact info is in the show notes. And if you like this podcast and found this information valuable, please share it with a friend. You can learn more about Salida, Colorado and the real estate market here on my YouTube channel, Living in Salida, Colorado. Thanks for listening and take care.